We are now live.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for coming to our community engagement. Just going to briefly outline the agenda for you. We're going to start with introducing some of our team members. And then I'm going to provide some basic information about the quarry itself and the proposed agreement. After that, I'll go through some questions that we've previously received. Then I'll turn it over to the wildlife manager, who will discuss some of the natural environmental impacts and also relay questions and answers that she's previously received. After that, we'll open the floor to any questions and comments. And then we have a survey that we're encouraging all of you to fill out. And the last slide of the presentation will be contact information in order to get that survey to you. On January 27th of this year, elected council decided to send a proposed agreement with Port Colborne Quarries to community engagement to see if there's sufficient support from the community for them to consider supporting the agreement themselves. So I'll show you some maps in a moment, but Port Colborne Quarries is proposing to extend its existing Pit 3, and this new extension will also be a below water table quarry. Pit 3 is located in the eastern portion of the city of Port Colborne, near the intersection of Miller and Highway 3. The company plans to extract 175 acres of a 262-acre property. It will maintain setbacks of 30 meters along roads, 15 amongst property boundaries, and 10 meters from a deciduous swamp. The company is asking the provincial government to authorize a production of just over 1.8, and production of 1.8 tons. So this kind of bird's eye view gives you an idea of how numerous aggregate or quarry operations are in Nanfan territory. You can just see on the left there. It almost looks like most of southern Ontario is red. There's so many quarries. And on the right side, you can see a view closer to home of the hundreds of quarries that exist right there. This map we're getting a little closer. So Port Colborne, Niagara Peninsula. And this is the property themselves. So you see the first two in blue are existing operations. Then next to the first two, there's the existing Pit 3. And so that area you see in red is where the pit extension is being proposed. So right at the outset, I should notice that the proposed agreements and any agreements we may have with aggregate companies, involve the proponent recognizing that companies should compensate Six Nations of the Grand River from resources extracted from its traditional and treaty territory. Unfortunately, companies do not have an obligation to provide financial restitution. The Ministry of Natural Resources, which oversees quarries, aggregate production properties in the province, is unwilling to advance any financial restitution for First Nations. And even as far as consultation goes, the ministry has certainly been willing to greenlight quarries where there has not been sufficient First Nation consultation. So the key elements of the agreement are that elected council will receive 10 cents per ton of aggregate, resulting in approximately $4.2 million over the life of the quarry. We are slowly assembling a number of agreements with aggregate companies. The hope is now we're getting up to receiving hundreds of thousands a year, and we expect that will be millions a year in the not too distant future. In addition, that 10-cent rate will be adjusted every 2 years to account for inflation. As people know, that's been a big issue recently. So, unlike our past agreement, we made sure to include an inflation clause in this one. There's also language obligating the company to consult with elected council once the project reaches final rehabilitation. And Lauren will briefly comment on what that rehabilitation will look like. There's also a clause in the agreement where the company agrees to work with elected council on employment, contracting, and apprenticeship opportunities. But I do have to caution you for this one, because it's a pit extension. There's already a workforce, there's already procurement agreements. So while the company is obligated to have those discussions with elected council, there's a sizable number of opportunities aren't expected for this one. And I'm just going to read through a list of previously submitted questions and provide some answers to those. Who owns the land after the quarry is done? The first pit they have at that location opened in 1954, and as mentioned, they're now on pit 3, and they currently own all of the land. They, of course, can't rule out the property being sold in the future, but the agreement will apply to whoever owns that Port Colborne Quarry site. What is the lifetime of the quarry? The lifetime of the quarry is estimated to be around 25 to 35 years. It really depends on how well the economy is doing, what the demand is, and which will dictate, whether it's closer to 25 or closer to 35. What is the agreement/community engagement process? In step 1, a member of the CAP team attends a pre-consultation meeting, or there is a notification from the municipality or proponent. Step 2, initial consultation. Next step, the reports produced go through internal and external review. Then there's a series of meetings and emails going back and forth on the comments produced in the reports. Step 5 is negotiations on accommodation. Then next step, if accommodation is achieved, a draft agreement is produced. Whereas the next step, that agreement is taken to the Lands and Resources and Wealth Economy Committee for approval to go to full council at political liaison. If the committee approves it, it then goes to political liaison, which in this and certainly most cases directs it goes to community engagement. Whereupon a report is created from the community engagements like this one and given to each councillor and the chief. Council and chief assesses and then decides whether to vote to approve the agreement. If approved, a final agreement is created and signed. If not approved, there'll be no agreement, and the proponent, Port Colborne Quarries, would just carry on with their project as they otherwise would. What is the size of the expansion? A total of 262.2 acres, 175.7 acres of which will be subject to extraction. Why are you talking to us now? That was directed to the company. There is only an obligation to consult on new or existing pits, as it is decreed by the Ministry of Natural Resources. So all the hundreds of existing pits Unfortunately, the province does not recognize a duty to consult. What happens if we say no? If we say no, the ministry will still give them their permits. And then the Ministry of Natural Resources has told us they will not withhold any permit for a lack of accommodation. What about archaeology? Any monitors on the sites? All three monitors, Six Nations of the Grand River, Mississaugas of the Credit, and HDI, were on site in 2019 and 2020. Is this the last time you'll be talking to us? A question directed to the company. There will be ongoing conversations. As previously mentioned, there's a rehabilitation agreement. And then every 2 years, we're getting together just to verify the rate of inflation for future payments. What happens if it is sold? Referring to the property or company. They currently keep ownership of their existing aggregates, but they can't speak for their next generation. As mentioned, the lifespan is 25 to 35 years. But again, the agreement applies to whoever operates that quarry site. They're only talking to us because there's an expansion, right? Yes, there is no obligation to consult on existing pits. They don't have to give us anything, right? No, the ministry will not enforce accommodation, and Ontario has not implemented an aggregate levy. What about HDI? HDI was in discussions with the proponent. Their archaeology monitors were on site in 2019 and 2020. What notification did the CAP team, that's the Consultation and Accommodation Process team of the Lands and Resources Department, provide for community engagement? On April 3rd and 4th, mail was dropped off at Six Nations the Grand River Post Office, Hagersville Post Office, Caledonia Post Office, and Waterford Post Office. This was to ensure all registered mailboxes on the reserve were delivered to. It was in Turtle Island News and Two Row Times. It was on elected council's social media app and on the radio update. Why is the company agreeing to pay us anything? Because they have accepted the principle that Six Nations of the Grand River is entitled to accommodation for developments on its treaty and traditional territories. Plus, time pressures might have had something to do with it. What determines when the project meets the end of its lifespan? Depletion of the aggregate. Once the quarry material is exhausted, the operation ends and rehabilitation either begins or accelerates. Is our community going to be involved in monitoring? There is an option for someone from the Lands and Resources Department to attend the site to verify company activities. Who owns the company? Port Colborne Quarries is owned by Rankin Construction. And if there's further questions about the company, we can, of course, answer that. And we can also get members in touch with company representatives. So those are all the previously submitted questions I have. And I'm now going to turn the floor over to Lauren.
Thank you. So my name is Lauren Jones. I'm the Wildlife and Stewardship Manager for the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office. This project was reviewed by Shared Valued Solutions, which is a consulting company which the CAP team employs to provide environmental comments on behalf of Six Nations. While I do often do review from a terrestrial ecological standpoint, this project, as with most quarry projects, has a lot more water and geomorphological conditions, and so the review was outsourced to those more knowledgeable than I in those areas. With that being said, I will do my best to summarize, but please keep this in mind that some questions may have to be taken back to the original reviewers. So I'm going to try and summarize what the document said, then hopefully try to circle back around to what SVS commented and the results from those comments. For background and baseline, the pit itself is located within an area surrounded by existing pits and agricultural fields. Generally speaking, when we're discussing quarries, there is a phased approach to operations. However, as Peter just mentioned, this is an expansion, so it is just the one section. Now, in a phased approach, as sections are depleted of resources, the company will usually begin renaturalization or restoration plans per their set out planning, as in a land will be returned to an alternative land use after the extraction has taken place. So in this case, it will be returned to a quarry lake. There are some surface water features within the study area, including 4 man-made ponds, the Wignall Drain, and wetland to the north of the project area. Now, other existing conditions within the study area include the northern part of the site contains a maple woodland and the Wignall Drain, as previously mentioned. This drain is identified as type 2 fish habitat, so it's referred to as fish habitat and is a municipal drain, and so was previously straightened. This drain also empties into Lake Erie. Now, there was no fish observed within this drain during the 2017-2019 investigations, just the fish habitat itself, and then there is connection to the areas where there are fish during high water circumstances. Additional investigations are slated to characterize and identify the extent and the importance of this fish habitat due to the intention to realign this part of the drain per SVS comments. As Peter mentioned, there are some buffers being put in place, a 10-meter buffer to the deciduous swamp on the north end of the site, which is not considered a provincially significant wetland, but is considered a significant woodland. Whereas there is significant woodland, a 30-meter buffer will be used, and the Conservation Authority in the area has identified the swamp as a regulated natural heritage feature as well. This area does indeed have potential to be impacted hydrologically from project activities. Other natural features that may be affected, there is a landbird migratory stopover area, potential bat maternity roosting, and potential amphibian breeding within the Upper Wignall Drain wetland complex. So it's a little bit hard to, I guess we don't have a mouse, do we? Basically in the top right corner, yeah, lovely. So in the top right corner within the red box, that light blue area is the Wignall wetland complex that we're discussing. There's also amphibian breeding ponds near the Humberston Speedway, a deer wintering area, which is not big enough to be considered significant. Species observed within the study area, acoustic monitoring did detect 5 species of bats, 4 of which are indicated on federal species at risk list, 1 on the provincial list. Potential maternity roosting sites for bats in treed and human-based environments. However, the acoustic studies indicated that nesting was unlikely within the study area itself. Some notable birds include bank swallow, barn swallow, bobolink, eastern meadowlark, chimney swift, wood thrush, grasshopper sparrow, common nighthawk. The majority of these are identified as species at risk. Mammals identified included white-tailed deer, muskrat, and vole. Amphibians, the most notable of which being American bullfrog. Bullfrog was observed in a pond that will be removed. The proponent does intend to offset these effects by rehabilitation plans after aggregate has been removed. Reptiles encountered included common snapping turtle, midland painted turtle, garter snake. There was also historical sightings of Blanding's turtle in 2019. Once again, habitats for snapping turtle and Blanding's turtle are planned to be removed. However, offsetting for Blanding's will take place almost immediately, while the offset for snapping turtle will take place after the aggregate has been removed. Okay, regarding plants, plants to be impacted: silver maple, reed canary grass, pussy willow, red osier dogwood, and green ash. They did detect some rare plants such as tamarack and necklace sedge, and some invasive species such as buckthorn and garlic mustard. The majority of direct impacts will take place within tree removal for a 1.2 hectare area, which contains very young ash trees. Ash trees, this particular section of ash, was determined to be heavily impacted by emerald ash borer. Mitigation and offset for impacts to species at risk. As mentioned at the beginning, quarries will have a restoration plan for the end of operations. In addition to this, quarry eventually being turned into a lake, immediate replacement of landing turtle habitat and turtle rescue is slated to take place prior to those impacts being felt by those species. As with most projects, general timing windows will be followed for sensitive breeding times, such as for fish and for birds. This is legislatively required. The water from existing quarrying activities currently is monitored for water quality components like hydrogen sulfide, suspended solids, grease, and oil. This monitoring will continue with this pit expansion. Overall, the addition of another quarry in the area is anticipated to increase runoff and decrease infiltration, meaning that active management of water will have to take place. Usually, our primary concern with water management is how this flow will be controlled and prevented from altering wetland hydrology in the area. So again, this is why I pointed out that little wetland. Thank you, Peter. So potential impacts can come with increased water flows, such as more erosion, flooding, and movement of sediment, both close by and downstream, for example, in Lake Erie. The proponent plans to partly address this by sending water to 2 separate locations within the Wendell Drain. Okay, concerns brought forth by SBS and the responses. SBS asserts that the environmental mitigation options put in place are not adequate to make up for the impacts. Keep in mind that Six Nations has received other accommodations in addition to the environmental ones, so I'm going to try and go into those now. So the proponent will be realigning a creek, which has been identified as fish habitat. This carries flow to a nearby wetland. SBS felt that the realignment was not properly considered with original hydrological assessment. To address this, the proponent has agreed to collect more data and reassess conclusions in response to this comment. Additional data will include peak flows, flow regime, erosion, and flooding data. Most of the data collected from the proponent with regards to hydrology was collected between 2017 and 2019. This is quite old data. The proponent has agreed to carry out more studies and to share this information with Six Nations in the future. Unclear and outstanding information collected with regards to some surface water monitoring and lack of water quality information was flagged by SBS. The proponent has agreed to fix the issue and share follow-up information with new monitors being deployed. SBS felt that there was inadequate baseline collected and inadequate plans to monitor changes to groundwater quality and quantity in relationship to the Wignall Drain. So that is the dark blue section that goes in between the red. Yeah, so that's straightened down and across. Yeah, dark blue. Perfect. Where was I? They felt that there was very little survey effort taking place to capture effects to the Wignall Drain over time, with seasonal variations and not a comprehensive enough plan to capture and address changes in groundwater should they occur as the operation continues. SBS felt that there was an inadequate amount of effort done to characterize the potential for fish and fish habitat within the Wignall Drain, including using appropriate timing and protocols to be used for surveys and missing survey results that have not been provided for review. With regards to terrestrial comments, SBS felt that there were inconsistencies and inadequate effort for assessment methodologies to effectively and appropriately determine the baseline conditions of terrestrial wildlife and ecosystem. So essentially just not enough work being done. SBS asked for more information regarding the details and feasibility for current Blanding's turtle habitat compensation, and the survey effort in identifying and confirming bat roosting habitat in forested environments, including the survey methodology used for acoustic monitoring and the QA/QC, was also drawn into question. With regards to the rehabilitation plan, SBS took issue with the lack of invasive species management and general monitoring associated with the rehabilitation. They also took issue with handling of imported soil and agricultural soil. SBS took issue with ratios used for terrestrial ecosystem offset and did negotiate further involvement and consultation with Six Nations about the rehabilitation plan. SBS also flagged some missing information, lack of assessment for impacts to milk snake, despite a high likelihood that they would be occurring in the area, lack of proper assessment for cumulative effects, for example, temporal delays in filling of new wetlands and multiple pits taking up more land and more land, lack of assessment of impacts to species of lack of assessment of impacts to species of Six Nations importance, for example, deer. SBS felt that the proponent was incorrectly attributing some effects to existing pit activities and downplaying the effects that an additional pit would have. In response to these comments, the proponent has agreed to additional surveys regarding groundwater impacts, fish and fish habitat surveys, additional vegetation surveys, and a cumulative effects assessment within the project footprint with regards to the quarry itself, agricultural, and residential development impacts. The proponent will provide additional communications with regards to sharing information around these new studies and applications like permits to take water and environmental compliance to Six Nations. With regards to additional plans, in response to changes in flow regimes, the proponent has also agreed to creating an adaptive management plan to address water quality and quantity issues within the northern wetland complex, that one that I keep on pointing out. This plan is anticipated to include thresholds and actions which would address outstanding data and issues as a result of altered water movement. SBS also requested that Six Nations be included in the implementation of this plan, and active participation for sampling activities is an option for community members to get involved with if they feel so inclined. Okay, that's all I have for the speech. I'll go through the questions. I hope I have the right version. Number one, what is the quarry afterwards? As mentioned, the quarry will be turned into a quarry lake. This does happen naturally once they stop actively pumping out the water for their activities. It does naturally fill up using groundwater and rain. As mentioned, Six Nations does have input onto the rehabilitation plans. And as per usual, we do advocate and prioritize diverse ecosystems and trying to make this as suitable for as many species as possible. What trees are being removed? As mentioned, there is 1.2 hectares being removed of ash trees, which are already impacted by emerald ash borer. So these trees do have a low life expectancy, and the removed trees will not be going to Six Nations of the Grand River for firewood or otherwise, because they are infected with an invasive species, and we try to protect the forest here. So is it phased? And with the 4 phases being outlined on the map, it is not phased, it is an expansion of the pit. So pit 1 and 2 are complete, and they are currently on to pit 3. Oh, sorry, pit 4? Pit 3. What is the rehabilitation going to be? The quarry will be turned into a quarry lake, which will be naturally filled with rain and groundwater after active pumping has ceased. Six Nations, again, has input into rehabilitation plans. If anyone is interested or has particular concerns, please reach out to the Six Nations Lands and Resources Office. Will there be continuous monitoring? Yes, for water quality and quantity. This is very common with quarries. Is there monitoring for species? What happens if there are adverse effects? There is monitoring for offset habitats. It is legislatively required as part of the permitting process. Ongoing monitoring once the rehabilitation plans are created and underway is certainly a possibility with Six Nations involvement. If there's particular concerning aspects, please let us know. What could go wrong? So operationally, mechanically, things do happen. I believe this was a question that was asked to the proponent themselves. The proponent does have protocols in place should there be spills, something to that effect. And they are, again, legislatively required to fix those issues. Can I have a copy of the natural environment speech, I'm assuming that's supposed to say, / presentation. The presentation and reports are all available to be sent by email. The EIS is very large, and so unfortunately we would have to mail you a memory stick to share that with you. And I'm hoping that is all the questions.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Before we proceed further, my apologies. As you know, introductions are traditionally given at the beginning of the meeting, not towards the end. So just do a go-around for members of the consultation accommodation process team who are in the room. We'll start with Lonnie and go clockwise.
Good evening. I am Lonnie Bomberry, and I'm the Director of the Land Resources Department for the Six Nations Council.
Good evening, everyone. Don Russell. I am the Consultation Administrative Assistant.
Good evening. I'm Taylor Hill, the Assistant Director at Lands and Resources.
I'm Peter Graham, the Consultation Supervisor.
Lauren Jones, I'm the manager of the Six Nations Wildlife and Stewardship Office.
All right, we're just about to open the floor to any questions or comments there might be. But first, our Assistant Director has just talked to you briefly about the survey.
I was going to start the questions and then talk about the survey, if that's okay. I think the first question I'm going to direct to you, Lonnie. It's a question on undripped, particularly free, prior, and informed consent and how it applies to Ontario.
The UNDRIP legislation is only federal legislation. So the federal government has enacted legislation which is similar to the UNDRIP of the United Nations. So they apply it where it affects them with respect to projects that they have control jurisdiction over across Canada. But in Ontario, the UNDRIP, there is no legislation. Ontario has not enacted legislation and put it in force. So in effect, we have the federal government who has minimal involvement in most things. We're in a province where mostly everything is done by the provincial government, and the UNDRIP legislation doesn't apply to them.
The next question I'll forward to you, Phil. They're just kind of question on the Nanfan Treaty, which this falls under. So if you could maybe give a brief overview. Phil, you're on mute.
Yep. Okay, my apologies. The Nanfan Treaty basically was a treaty that was to protect our lands and resources from and the territory from invasion by the French. So the British, we allowed them to put their castles upon our lands and protect from those invasions. So it's guarantees us the right to the natural resources, therefore, and that under the legal duty to consult and accommodate brings us in a long about way here why we're trying to get the compensation if there's developments and it's done properly, that Six Nations should be entitled to compensation in the Nanfan Treaty areas. So, I mean, it was a military protective measure that Six Nations allowed Britain onto our land. So it's a long history, but that's the real principles of it.
The next question is, Peter, could you put up the slide with all the existing aggregate pits?
Certainly.
So the question is, what happens if there isn't consent slash, I guess, support for the agreement? And basically, Port Colborne Quarries would become one of these red dots of all the existing aggregate pits.
Yes, that's right. If agreement isn't signed on Six Nations end, the quarry would proceed as planned. The only difference is that there wouldn't be there wouldn't be, of course, the 10 cents plus inflation adjustment, nor the guaranteed engagement consultation about the final quarry rehabilitation. But it basically, it's this or nothing, basically.
Lonnie, there's a couple of questions, but does this agreement relinquish our title to the lands?
No, it does not. It's actually a recognition of our of not really the title to the lands, but our right under treaty to use the lands to our benefit. So so nothing is extinguished. It only actually confirms that that Crown, other agencies, companies such as this should consult with us in the Nanfan Treaty area whenever they are doing developments.
Another question, I don't know if you can answer this. Is this on patented lease re-agreement land? I say the question was, is this on patented lease re-agreement land? I guess it's not in the Haldeman tract, so there was nothing particularly there. But I don't know if you want to say more on that, Lonnie.
No, it's not on. Uh, the only area that might apply would be the Haldeman tract lands, Haldeman Treaty, but that doesn't uh, apply here. The question, the bigger question about the leases in the Haldeman tract is that uh, a lot of history shows that we frequently requested that the Crown lease our lands, and they refuse to do so. That's just part of the litigation that we're going on against Canada and Ontario.
Lonnie, they also asked if they could have a copy of the agreement.
I can add that. Unfortunately, we can't give out copies, but you're welcome. Please, you have both the phone number and an email address up there for the Lands and Resources Department. Just make an appointment. Let us know when's convenient for you to come by, and you're allowed to look at the agreement at your leisure. You're just not allowed to photocopy it, but you're certainly welcome to read it all and take notes.
I don't see any more questions right now, so I guess I'll move on to the survey says questions, comments, and fact sheet, and then I'll see if anyone more come on. So yeah, we are there is a questions, comments, and fact sheet. So if we would like you to fill it out. Any questions, comments, or feedback. If you want your questions answered personally, please put some kind of contact information on it. Otherwise, it's hard to answer. Yeah, and then there are still remaining gift cards for people who hand it in. Once they run out, they're out. But yes, please fill out and hand it in. I think on the slide there is a phone number and an email. I don't know if you wanted to say more on that, Peter.
Nope, that's great. You can either phone, email, or drop by the office during normal business hours. Yeah, there aren't any questions or comments at the moment, but we'll wait a few more minutes before closing, just in case some come up.
This is like waiting for the kettle to boil.
All right, it's never pleasant sitting around waiting for the kettle to boil, and I don't still don't see any further comments or questions. So I'm gonna end the stream in about 30 seconds, unless anyone has some final thoughts. Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, this will be the end of our live stream. Again, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening to attend. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us, at the phone number and email provided. Especially if you have, questions about this project or would like to get a survey. But also if you have any other questions about development in your Nanfan and Haldeman treaty territories, please reach out. Thank you and have a good night.